Before the dark, before the oath, before the scars and the silence and the long, terrible road that followed, there was a garden. A small, perfect, impossibly beautiful garden tucked away from the rest of the world, where the flowers glowed in the dark and the waterfalls sang, and the ancient trees grew so tall they seemed to hold the sky up on their branches. This place was called the Garden of Coils, and in the Garden of Coils there lived a family. A father named Solon, whose silver-flecked dark green scales caught the morning light like scattered stars. A mother named Lyria, whose jade green body moved through the garden with the quiet grace of someone who understood every living thing around her. And a child, small and bright and perpetually convinced he was more impressive than he actually was, named Dracyn. Dracyn had decided at the impressive age of 11 days that he was an explorer. He had mapped in his own estimation approximately 60% of the Garden of Coils. Solon pointed out, with the particular patience of a parent who had said this many times before, that 60% was a generous description for a child who once got lost 3 feet from the front root in the fog. Dracyn maintained that the fog was unusually thick that day. The debate had been ongoing for some time. He was, in truth, a genuinely happy child. The garden was small, no more than half a mile in any direction, but to Dracyn, it was the entire universe. Every morning he raced through it as if he had never seen it before. Every evening he returned home smelling of flowers and river water and whatever he got into that day, which was always something. But it was his father's lessons that Dracyn would carry the longest. Solon had a way of saying things that seemed simple in the moment and enormous later. He would lower his great head to his son's level and speak quietly, as if he were sharing a secret with the universe itself, not just a small child who still got distracted by passing insects. He told his son once, in the cool shade under the root arch where the moss grew thickest and the light came in gold and filtered, that the world beyond the garden was not kind by default, that darkness existed there with no good reason for being. That when Dracyn met it, and he would meet it, the task was not to run from it and not to become it. The task was to find the thin gold thread that ran through even the worst of moments, the thread that led you home. Dracyn, 11 days old and full of breakfast, nodded seriously and then asked if there was a literal thread he should be looking for. Solon told him to go play, but he was smiling when he said it. The days passed the way days do when life is good, quickly and without any awareness of their own value. Dracyn grew a little, explored a little more, got lost significantly less, which he considered a major personal achievement. Lyria tended her herbs and sang in a low voice that seemed to make the flowers grow toward her. Solon watched the edge of the garden sometimes in the evenings, and Dracyn noticed but never asked why. Children rarely ask the questions that matter until it is too late to get the answer. The evening of the 14th day came in differently than the others. The driftflies went quiet an hour before they usually did. The flowers dimmed without reason, and Solon, who never paced, began to pace. He did not say anything to Lyria. He did not need to. After years together, a mate learns to read silence the way other creatures read words. She gathered Dracyn quietly and brought him inside. She did not explain why. Dracyn, who was tired from a long afternoon of exploring, did not ask. He curled into his corner of the hollow and watched his father through the crack in the root, and he waited for the feeling to pass. The feeling did not pass. It arrived instead, and it arrived in the shape of something that had not walked this earth in a long time. There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. Dracyn was 11 days old the first time he understood that something existed in the world that was not just dangerous, but wrong. A wrongness that had nothing to do with accident or hunger or the ordinary violence of nature. Something that chose, something that enjoyed the choosing. When SKARRETH the Devourer entered the Garden of Coils, the garden knew it first. Every flower went dark simultaneously. Every sound stopped. The waterfall kept running because water has no instinct for survival, but everything that breathed went silent. He was immense. Not merely large the way a grown serpent is large, but large in a way that made the concept of scale seem broken. His scales were the black of deep space, the black that has no light in it anywhere. His belly pulsed with a deep crimson like fire through stone, and his eyes, both of them, were milky white and perfectly still. Dead eyes. Not the eyes of something sleeping, the eyes of something that had decided long ago that caring about anything was a waste of the only resource that mattered: time. Skarreth spoke first. He said Solin's name the way a stone says nothing, slowly, without emotion, without hurry. He said there was a debt. He said he had come to collect it. He spoke of these things like someone discussing the weather, as simple facts about the world, regrettable perhaps, but entirely ordinary. Solin told him to leave. He said it clearly and without begging, because that was who Solin was. He stood between that ancient monster and the hollow where his family slept, and he told it to leave. And for one moment, one small, precious, stupid moment, Dracyn, watching through the crack in the root, thought that might actually work. It did not work. Solin fought. He fought with everything he had. He was not a warrior, had never wanted to be, but he was a father, and sometimes that's more than enough to produce something extraordinary in the body of an ordinary creature. He struck at Skarreth's scarred snout with precise, desperate ferocity, targeting the old wounds with an accuracy that surprised even the ancient monster for a moment, just for a moment. Then Skarreth sighed, the way something sighs when dealing with an inconvenience, and that sigh was the worst sound Dracyn had ever heard. Lyria came out of the hollow, not to fight. She knew what fighting would accomplish. She came out to look at her son. Through the crack in the root, through the smoke and the flickering ember light, she found Dracyn's eyes with hers and she held them. She did not speak because she could not speak without telling Skarreth exactly where her child was hidden, so she said everything without words. She said, "Stay." She said, "Be still." She said, "I love you, and I'm proud of you, and you are going to be more than you can possibly imagine right now, and I need you to be brave in a way no child should ever have to be brave, and I am so sorry I cannot protect you from this moment." Dracyn understood every word of it. He stayed hidden. He did exactly what she told him. He pressed his small body against the bark and he made himself completely still, and he watched and he could not look away, and he did not make a single sound. Not when Solin fell, not when Lyria, not when... He stayed still. He did what she asked, and Skarreth moved away through the tree line, unhurried, the way he had arrived, and was gone. And the garden burned quietly around the small hidden child who was not going to be a child much longer. He came out of hiding when the light came, not because he was brave. He was not brave yet. He came out because staying in the hollow had become something his body physically could not continue to do. He stood in the center of what had been the Garden of Coils and looked at it carefully, the way you look at something when you are trying very hard to understand it and your mind keeps refusing to cooperate. The flowers were dark, the trees were broken, the waterfall was still running over there in the distance, completely indifferent, and something about that specific indifference, the water just continuing as if nothing had happened, made the reality of it land in a way it hadn't quite before. He found his father's flower band in the ash. He recognized it immediately. He had seen it every day of his life around that strong, dignified neck. He reached out and touched it the way he had never touched it when Solin was wearing it, carefully as if it were something holy. He wrapped it around his own neck. It was far too large. It hung loose and heavy and too big in every way, and he did not take it off. He was not going to take it off. He sat there through the entire morning. He did not eat. He did not move. He thought about the gold thread his father had told him about. He searched for it the way you search for something you have lost, first carefully, then frantically, then hopelessly. He could not find it. He decided he would find it later. He decided that finding it later was acceptable. He decided that there were in this particular moment more pressing matters to attend to. He had an oath to make. He climbed to the highest point of the ruins, the top of what had been the great family tree, cracked and fallen, but still the tallest thing remaining, and he stood there in the new morning light with his father's flower band around his neck, and he looked toward the tree line where Skarreth had gone. He was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, not loudly, not dramatically. He said it the way you say something when you mean it more than you have ever meant anything before. Quietly, once, perfectly. He said he was going to find Skarreth. He said he did not know how or when or what he would need to become. He said he was going to make sure that Skarreth remembered their names, Solon and Lyria, before the end. He said this to no one and to everything simultaneously. There was no thunder, no ancient magic responding to the moment with celestial signs, just a small ruined garden and a small grieving child, and a promise made to the morning sky. But some promises are written in something deeper than words, and the universe, which had been very quiet all morning, leaned in a little closer. He had no plan, no map, no food, no direction, no idea where Skarreth had gone or how far or what lay between here and there. He had a flower band, he had an oath. He had a direction that was simply away from this and toward whatever comes next. For a child who had never left the Garden of Coils in his entire life, this was, by any reasonable measure, completely insufficient. He walked into the wild forest anyway. And the forest, which was very large and very dark and filled with things that had never heard of the Garden of Coils, opened up and swallowed him like a sentence. He had been walking for perhaps an hour when something in the undergrowth to his left said quite clearly and without any apparent concern for the social convention of sneaking up on recently bereaved children in dark forests that he smelled like smoke. And also, the voice continued, that he smelled like someone who had just made a very large promise they had absolutely no idea how to keep, both simultaneously, which it noted was quite rare. Dracyn looked. He had not encountered many creatures outside the garden, mostly insects and the occasional passing bird. He had never encountered anything like this. The thing looking at him from behind a root was round and small and covered in moss, and had a glowing mushroom growing from the top of its head, and appeared to be operating on one very large eye that was currently regarding him with intense scientific interest. Dracyn said, very reasonably given the circumstances, "What are you?" The creature told him at considerable length that this was an excellent question. It told him no one knew the answer, including itself, which it found philosophically liberating. Its name was Glimmick. It had been following Dracyn for approximately 1.5 miles. It was very small, but surprisingly fast. It wanted that on record. And it had heard the oath, and had found it genuinely moving in a way that several things it had experienced lately had not been, including a sunrise it watched last week that everyone claimed was spectacular, which it thought was frankly average. Dracyn said, "You heard the oath." Glimmick confirmed this. It said the oath was heavy on sincerity and light on logistics, which in its experience was the signature of either a great hero or a catastrophic disaster, and the only reliable way to determine which was to continue and find out. It said it was debating whether to accompany Dracyn on his journey, and that the debate was currently leaning to yes because the alternative was going back to collect rocks. It collects beautiful rocks, it clarified, not edible ones, and frankly, this seemed more interesting. Dracyn looked at this creature, this small, strange, glowing, rambling, one-eyed creature that collected rocks and spoke in riddles, and had followed him 1.5 miles through a dark forest at night for no apparent reason, except that it found him interesting, and felt for the first time since the garden had burned something very small and very fragile that was not quite hope, but was perhaps the first rough material from which hope is eventually constructed. He told Glimmick it could come. Glimmick said it was terrified. Full disclosure, it said, completely and utterly terrified. Dracyn said he was too. Glimmick said this was excellent news. It had found in its experience that the things worth doing almost always began with terror, and the things that did not begin with terror were usually either very boring or very safe,
and very boring and very safe things rarely produced good stories. Dracyn thought about his father, about the gold thread, about the thing he did not yet understand. He thought, maybe that's where the thread starts. Maybe that's where you begin to find it. He was 11 days old. He had lost everything. He was walking into a world he had never seen, accompanied by a bioluminescent mushroom-headed creature of unknown origin that collected rocks and spoke in riddles. He had a promise, he had an oath, he had a flower dand that was too big, and a scar that had not formed yet, and a destiny that was going to take a very long time and cost him more than he could possibly imagine. And somewhere out there, SKARRETH the Devourer moved through the world like a slow, cold catastrophe, growing stronger with every passing season, with no idea that the thing that was eventually going to end him was currently standing in a dark forest, trying to figure out if the glowing creature beside him was friend or fever dream. It was both, as it turned out, but that is a story for another day. This was only the beginning. Vengeance Reborn, Episode 1, The Day the Garden Burned. The journey has begun.